Igor's going to answer all the questions.
So the first one is, besides Ivy, what can we expect from the future major upgrades? And like before you start answering this, maybe answer also when Ivy is coming, because that's what I heard a lot of people asking. So this is a combined question. When is it coming and what can you expect besides Ivy?
Cool. Well, I don't know if everybody knows me here. I'm Igor, tech lead on Angular. I've been on Angular for 9.5 years now, and I do a lot of stuff on Angular. So when is Ivy coming? The current plan is to release Ivy as an opt-in in version 8, which is scheduled for mid-May, with RC in mid-April. What this means is that you'll be able to take your either existing application or new CLI application, flip a flag, and you'll have the entire Ivy pipeline. You should see faster builds, slower payload size, especially when it comes to the variable cost of translating templates to generate code. We expect 20 to 50% improvement depending on the template and the kind of features you're using. We are making it opt-in because Ivy is a huge change. We basically rewrote the entire Angular at this point, unfortunately. I wish we had done it differently, but it's too late to change this. So we're just going through the final checks. We are rolling Ivy in Google as we speak. There are people in Sunnyvale working on making sure that Ivy is fully compatible with all of the applications we have at Google. And we plan to flip the switch at Google sometime before version 8. So before we release it to you, we want to make sure that it's good enough that Google can run on it by default and everybody at Google is using Ivy. Because it's a lot of work, we don't expect that we'll have all of the features in version 8. So for example, we expect language service is not going to work yet. We expect internationalization is not going to be fully feature complete. And there might be some other features missing. This is why it's not going to be on by default. But it's going to be good enough that you can play with it. Some simpler projects that don't use all of the features will be able to switch, give us feedback, and we'll be able to understand if everything works or if there are still issues that we need to fix before we make it the default. The current plan is to make Ivy the default in version 9, which is scheduled for September, October. That's the current plan. So when it comes to what other major features we are planning in the next versions, our philosophy is that you should just keep on using Angular, and as you upgrade, your application is just going to get better. Whether it's a faster build, or a smaller build size, or new features, whatever it is, it should be very non-disruptive for you to upgrade from one version to the next. And this is something that we still have a hard time people understanding because we rev the major versions every 6 months. We do so because we are compliant with Assembler, and for example, when we upgrade a TypeScript version, that's a breaking change because the compiler is stricter and it might require you to do some kind of refactorings. It will catch bugs that nobody's seen before, but are real bugs, and we want you to fix it. So the reason why we rev the major versions is because we want to tell you that every 6 months, we might require a little bit of your help to fix these bugs that slipped through in the past. But in between the 6 months windows, we promise to do the best we can to make all of the minor and patch versions non-disruptive. So you can just safely bump to them and get new features or get bug fixes without being broken. In a perfect world, this would always work. We don't live in a perfect world, so there are regressions, and we try to do our best to fix regressions when they come up. With that being said, in version 9, we do want Ivy to be the default. We are working on Bazel, so Alex showed the roadmap for Bazel with prototype in version 8, opt-in in version 9, and default sometime after version 9, hopefully 10. We'll see how things go. It's still too early. The project is very big. Besides that, when we talk about Ivy, what we currently mean by Ivy is the backwards compatible version of Ivy, which means all of the existing APIs keep on working. And in version 8, we will expose almost no new APIs that are Ivy specific. And this is intentional because we want to make sure that Ivy is backwards compatible as much as possible. And when I say as much as possible, it's not going to be fully backwards compatible because, and this ties to the question about 200 bugs that Ivy is supposed to fix. There are real bugs in the current implementation of the engine. And in Ivy, as we were re-implementing everything, we took a deep look at many of these issues and made hard calls about which bugs we want to fix and what we actually can fix and still not cause a lot of pain. Because at this point, there are so many applications that depend on even the undocumented and unspecified Angular behavior that if we just go and fix all of the bugs, we will be breaking applications. So even as we are fixing many of these 200 bugs, we actually need to do it in a way where we're not introducing a lot of pain for developers to get onto the fixed version. So we have a long document currently with the differences between the view engine, the current implementation of the runtime and the compiler, and Ivy. We're tracking the intentional breaking changes and making sure that we have a migration plan or that we are pretty sure that this is such a corner case that only large applications that have a ton of code and have exercised lots of use cases will maybe see this once or twice. And in that case, we want to have documented that there is a difference between version 7 and version 8 with Ivy. And we will ask you to actually fix the code. In some cases, we will have automatic refactoring tools that will fix the bugs for you. But in some cases, it's not possible. We will need human interaction, human to take a look at it and determine what is the right thing to do. One of the features that we are currently working on is a better upgrade story. How many people still care about AngularJS to Angular upgrades? One person, two. So this is the experience that we have. Most people either already upgraded or they're working on a large application where the migration is going to take a long time and they'll probably be migrating for the next year or two. We have a large team here in New York that is in the process and they'll still have years of AngularJS in their code base. But what we are trying to do is for these big teams make it easier to use Angular by enabling bootstrapping the application with Angular only and lazy loading AngularJS only in the parts of the application where it's still required. So what this allows you to do, even if you have a large application and it's going to take a long time to migrate, you should be able to migrate the core of the application, be able to bootstrap with Angular, and then if you have an application with a AngularJS router, we will actually make it possible for Angular router to understand AngularJS routing configuration. So you have only one router, the Angular router, and when the Angular router comes across an AngularJS route, it will lazy load Angular and start that part of the application as AngularJS. So this will make it much easier for large applications to migrate. Thinking of other features, we have lots of features planned after Ivy. All of the stuff, this will be like cleanup of the APIs. With Ivy, we no longer need ng modules, ng factories. We still need ng modules, but we do have plans on how to remove ng modules. I don't expect that this will happen in version 9 yet, just because it's a big project. Maybe we'll have a solid plan that we'll be able to share and have some prototypes in version 9, but I doubt that we'll be ready to roll it out in version 9 yet.
When you say remove engine modules, you mean make them optional?
Make them optional, yes. So like, as I said, everything we do, we're making sure that things are backwards compatible. And if they are not backwards compatible, we have automatic refactoring tools that you execute as part of ng update. And when you update from one version to the next, we just do transformation of the code for you to make the application compatible with the new APIs. So again, we're thinking very hard about how to make all the changes we are making backwards compatible or non-painful for developers. And part of the reason is that our team supports all of the applications of Google. At this point, it's like over 600 applications, I believe. And there's only one version of Angular at Google. So whenever if you were to change an API in a backwards incompatible way, we would break all these applications. So So the only way for us to make changes is to make them in a backwards compatible way, or as a combination of backwards compatible way and automatic refactoring tool that we just execute on the entire Google code base and submit the change, and everybody's using the API. And we've been doing this for 2 years, so this is like not a new thing. 4 years. Long time.
Yeah, since we introduced TypeScript.
Cool. We're kind of doing it backwards, but kind of have a round of intros. Igor just introduced himself, but basically your name and like what you do in the team.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, you're introduced.
I'm still Alex, still leading the Angular tooling team.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Greg. I've been on the team for about a year, and actually started on the open source side. I was 2 years ago. I heard about Angular and Bazel at NGConf, just started playing with it, and Alex got me online. And what I mostly work on is on the Bazel rules side of things. So currently getting Bazel to work better with Node, which is a little challenging because it's a bit different than the other ecosystems. But if my stuff works, then you won't have any questions for me, so because it's behind the scenes.
So the next question is about Zone.js and like what's happening with it. It was kind of going away at some point, but maybe not, and looks like it's coming back. So anybody has any context for this?
So Zones is a library that Angular uses under the hood. Most developers don't interact with Zones directly unless you're not doing something more advanced or you're debugging some very tricky problem. What we use Zones for is to intercept all of the asynchronous task scheduling and be able to automatically trigger change. But we were not successful. So the problem we face is that as soon as you start using native async await, the zones will not understand that there is a asynchronous task in schedule, which means a lot of chaos. It means like basically the whole system will break down. So in the meantime, everybody's fine because async await has been transpiled to promises, and we can intercept promises, so all is good. But we know that native async await is already implemented in all the browsers, and it's just a matter of time before developers will want to completely switch to the native version of this. So we have probably 2 years, year to 2 years between now and when this will be a real problem. So we have a plan on how to make zones optional by changing the APIs and how Angular works and how the change detection works, where we will need a little bit of help from you to tell us when the change detection should run. We are still working on making the APIs more economic and making this a very easy to understand change. The benefit of this will be that Zones is a pretty big library, relatively big. It's I think 30K non-minified, 10K minified. Sorry, 30K non-gzip, and I think 10K gzip. And Zones is something that needs to be loaded before any other code. So if we create a way in Angular to not have to depend on Zones, this will make it easier for us to get to better time to interactive because we'll have less dependencies to load up front. We also found that Zones are too magical, and it's very easy for developers to trigger change detection without intention. So having an explicit API where you say, oh, this component is now dirty, and we'll go and check it, makes it obvious when the change detection happened and why. This is no different than set state in React.js, where you need to tell the system explicitly, hey, I'm setting the state that marks the component dirty. So something along those lines you will see in Angular. Probably version 9, we would like to get it out as soon as possible after IB. is out, just so that we can get more feedback and understand if the APIs are good enough and have a good migration story for applications that depend on Node.js, which is most of the applications today. So that's the long answer. I'm not sure who asked the question, but are there any more questions related to this?
I think on the React side, they inject, like after each component is created, I think on the React side, after the components are created, they inject something that's aware of the change detection. Is that something that Angular team has considered?
Are you talking about hooks or?
No, like right now, if you wanted to manually invoke the change detection, you'd have to inject the change detection ref and mark things for change, which if you want to do that on every component would be kind of a pain. It'd be great if there was just something that was automatically added to every component.
So we have something we think is better. We have a global function you can call. This is the experimental API. It's not exposed yet, but if you look up mark dirty in Ivy, you will see some examples of how to use it. Basically, the way it works is you import mark dirty from Angular core, and then whenever you want to mark a component as dirty, you call mark dirty and pass this into the function, and that marks the component as dirty. So we don't want to mess with your components because that's your code. We're trying to avoid inheritance as much as we can because that limits your inheritance options. So this is why we are thinking of other ways how we could achieve the same thing.
I guess maybe a little bit. Have you explored proxies? I think you guys are trying to do that.
We've looked at proxies. We've been looking at proxies for 7 years now. Even before proxies were a thing. The problem with proxies is that you need to guarantee that all of the parts of the system interact only with the proxy object and not with the actual real object, which is often hard to guarantee. And then you can get into a situation where somehow somebody gets hold of the original object, modifies it, and weird things happen, and nobody understands why. So that's one problem. The other problem is that proxies add a lot of overhead, runtime overhead. The VMs de-optimize the code in a significant way. So there's a lot of cost to proxies. They look interesting though, and it's an option that we are looking at. We're just not. We see lots of problems with this, and I know that Vue's looking into this. There are other frameworks and libraries that use proxies or looked into proxies, and nobody has been able to use it in the best way, in a way that we would think like, yeah, this is no-brainer. But it's an option.
One more question is, when you mark component as dirty, does the process of tree shaking remove that component, like not compile it, or what happens with it?
So I'll just repeat the question for recording. If you mark component as dirty, will tree shaking remove the component?
What will happen with it when compile it using Ivy, right? Because Ivy is built on the entire idea of tree shaking, right?
Mhm.
So what will it?
So those are two separate things. Just because you mark the component as dirty at runtime, you tree shake at build time. So those are two separate things. You can still fully tree shake everything, that's fine. And then at runtime, the components that didn't get tree shaken will be instantiated at some point, hopefully, unless there's a bug in the system somewhere. And you will be able to call mark dirty on the component. So those two things are orthogonal.
So what does marking something as dirty give me there?
It just means that the state of the component has changed since the last time it was rendered, and you're telling Angular that it should go and check the state of the component and determine whether it needs to update DOM that is associated with that component.
So your plan to not depend on zone looks a lot like making pretty much on-push change detection strategy the default everywhere. If you do that, that means you wouldn't need to call markers dirty, right? If some reacting to some click means I update some values and it turns out one of those values is an input and one of my components, that means there are tree under that component, is dirty by default, right? So is that so you would be pretty much dropping the default change detection strategy for only on push?
Sort of. Just to repeat,
Yeah.
is mark as dirty the same as on push? Yes, but it's more. The on push change detection strategy only currently works on inputs. So only the change of the input marks the component as dirty automatically. In other cases, you have to call the change detector ref and call it mark dirty. With this mark dirty function, you are able to it's a more ergonomic version of on push. That's what it is.
Alright, next question is very specific. Somebody
Actually looked this up because I looked at the questions beforehand. Whoever asked this question, this is the kind of thing that makes a life very difficult, especially if you post stuff like this on our issue tracker, because then we're like, so what did the person think? There's almost no context about this. If you please added the issue number, that would help. I looked it up. I think you're talking about 24923. If not, then I have no idea what this is about. There is an issue that is open that is marked as a regression, where animation stopped working in version 6. I talked to Matthias before this meetup, and we know of this regression. We currently don't know the root cause of it, and because everybody's busy with Ivy, we just didn't get to it. However, I asked him to root cause it this week, and based on how much effort it is to fix it, we'll try to schedule it for fixing within the next patch version. Depending on the effort, we just don't know how bad it is. And typically we try to handle regressions much faster. It's just now we're in a crunch time for Ivy, so we actually ask everybody to deprioritize all the non-critical things in favor of Ivy, just so we can get it out in version 8. And this one slipped through the cracks.
do you feel like you gave enough context for 200 popular issues for Ivy, or do you want to talk more about that?
About
200 issues.
The 200 issues?
Yeah.
So yeah, I talked about it a little bit. Many of them will be fixed. I don't know if all 200, I don't know. Different corner cases that we missed before, and we're able to compare the current behavior with the desired behavior. So that's one way how we fix many of these issues. The other way how we fix many of the issues is Ivy is architecturally very different, and things that were previously very difficult and infeasible to fix in a timely manner are now either fixed or easy to fix. So for example, ng factories, all the problems caused by ng factories are gone because there are no more ng factories. So code splitting and lazy loading will become much easier. Again, we have backwards compatibility layers, so like the old APIs will keep on working, but we have a plan to remove, for example, component factor resolver. That API will no longer be needed with Ivy because you can just talk to component directly, and we don't need to resolve it.
Next question is about unit testing. Are there any plans to improve the experience? Yeah, that's.
I am not an expert at this.
So I can handle part of it. You talk about the basal part. We are going to make AOT compiler the default compiler for production development and testing. And we'll make it possible to use JIT compiler with AOT in testing, because in testing you need sometimes to be more dynamic than AOT, and AOT just adds unnecessary overhead. But in most cases, you just use AOT, so that will speed up unit testing, because a lot of the time currently in CLI when you run tests, you spend building stuff, and building stuff in the browser through the git compiler. So that no longer will be necessary. So that's the slowness part. The boilerplate, yes, I would love to fix it, and we'll get to it after IB. We have rough plans, but nothing too concrete to be able to share that. Component changes, material dialogues. So for material dialogues, there is a plan within the components team that works on the Angular material to provide testing harnesses for all the components, so you will not need to use the production components, but rather there will be a testing API that is like the fake for every single component, and that will make things like testing dialogues and testing out things much easier. You won't need to depend on the DOM structure of the material component. We will just tell you like trigger dialog, and you will no longer need to like search for divs and whatever to determine if the dialog was open or not. So you will have proper mocks for all the components. I don't know what the question is about component detect changes. Trigger and change detection?
Maybe if it's using on push, and you kind of have to like force change detection in some cases.
I'm not sure. Is the person in the room who asked this question?
Yeah, I mean, when you just, when you write the test, you have to do like.
Yeah, trigger change detection?
Yeah.
With the change to making zones optional, that will impact how we test things, and it should be more explicit, which will help in these testing cases. But I don't have concrete APIs to share with you now.
And it's probably like a year from now, closer.
I would expect like at least, we should have at least a rough or hopefully a detailed plan by version 9 that we'll be able to share.
Just going back to the DI stuff, has there ever been talk about breaking Angular's dependency injection out as a sort of vendor module that you could use in, say, like a TS node context away from Angular itself?
Yes, we've been discussing that for years. With the view engine and the current build pipeline, that was not possible because DI actually gets compiled out, and like there is no DI at runtime. Everything is just compiled. With Ivy, things are different, and there is more of a chance to actually break it out. But right now we're just focused on getting Ivy out and not breaking the world. So after Ivy, we can discuss this more. There is a bigger hope. Let's put it that way. There is a bigger hope that will happen.
Is there a community support lab?
There is a clone of our DI. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, it's from Minko. So Minko gets project before we hired him. So there is a version of DI that works just like the Angular DI, and you can use it in all projects. It's just not coming from our team. It's still not coming from our team.
It's coming from someone on our team, which is different.
Yeah, it's coming from someone on our team. but it's a community question.
Next question.
They're orthogonal. Bazel just runs a bundler, and it's the bundler's job to do the tree shaking. Bazel is slightly involved in making sure that the bundler is given the right inputs. Because the tree shaking algorithms, or the specific implementations, tend to look at specific syntax, and so it's kind of up to us in the build toolchain to make sure that the syntax appears in the place where the tree shaker expects it. But Bazel's not doing anything special there. It's just invoking the right commands.
And I can handle the Ivy part. So in Ivy, one of the biggest changes is that the runtime is fully modularized at the symbol level. So each feature, whether it's view queries or DI or all the lifecycle hooks, every single lifecycle hook, it's a symbol of its own, so that all the tree shakers, whether it's rollup or webpack, can see if that feature is used in the application, and if it's not, we can drop it. But it's even better than that, because if you start code splitting the application, we can see that to bootstrap the application, we need only this subset of features. And all these existing tools, rollup and webpack, are smart enough to know that that's what they need to bundle in the initial chunk. And when you lazy load some other route or other component, we see that that component uses a feature that hasn't been loaded yet, and the bundler is smart enough to know that it needs to bundle that feature into that chunk. So we are able to both tree shake the parts of the framework that are not being used, as well as code split the chunk of the framework that is being used and loaded lazily.
Just wanted to answer about the last question there about testing. I wanted to add that one of the things I've worked on is rules that will run Karma, will run Protractor, so Bazel will actually run your tests for you. I don't know exactly how they'll look when it's integrated with the CLI, but it's nice to have one unified build system that runs all your tests. And one of the cool things is, for example, the Karma rules, it'll actually download Firefox and Chrome for you as well, so you don't have to have this up on your machine, and you can control which version is going to run, and the same thing will run on CI as on your machine. So I don't know, I think it makes it a bit better for actually running the tests.
You had some hint in mind for that answer too. Did we cover what you?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Next question is about reactive forms. Are they ever going to be type safe?
Can we do all the other things you asked for?
Yes, this is a known issue. We are getting ready to make major improvements in forms, and we postponed this project because of Ivy. So this is like one of the bigger features that we would like to get done after Ivy's out, and we have some breathing room to actually work on forms. We are being offered some community help, so we are actually getting better at having community help us with some of this stuff. So I'm hoping that this is going to come in one of the next major versions. If it's going to be in version 9 or version 10, I don't know yet, but it's definitely on the list. And I know that this is something that people ask me for a lot. It's going to be a breaking change, so not only we need to fix it, but we also need to figure out how to get people onto the fixed version, which will probably require a lot of tooling and stuff like that.
Okay, there is a...
Any ideas on just like what composing with changing forms? Just like,
So
and will it be called form 3 too?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't like too painful. So some of the changes we want to do is improve the type surface of forms APIs, expose more of the stuff as observables, because not everything is observed, and it's painful to like have some stuff exposed as observable, some stuff not. We want to better support the dynamic use cases where you need to dynamically generate a form, which is possible today. It's just not great and not easy. It should be easy. I think those are like the main 3 things.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
And we are merging improvements into forms. I just reviewed the PR last touched. So that's one of the like small changes that make a big difference to many people.
And get rid of my own solution.
Yeah. So these small changes are easier for us to incorporate. Bigger things like exposing everything as observables or fixing these typing bugs, it's a bigger project where we actually need to think about how to roll it out so that we don't have to pay developers.
One more question about Ivy.
Yes. I think one of the clarifications I should make is that Ivy is not using incremental DOM, but it behaves as if it was using incremental DOM. Incremental DOM means that you still have DOM-like API that is exposed to developers, and you can interact with it, you can modify it, and that API, that modifications to this state are then reflected in the real DOM. This is not how Ivy works. Ivy still uses change detection and doesn't have an intermediate DOM representation between the state of the world in the JavaScript heap and the DOM state. However, the way Ivy works is we're able to reuse data structures, and this is how, for those who don't know about incremental DOM is similar to virtual DOM. The biggest difference is that you don't recreate the virtual DOM during each change detection. So like in React or in Vue under the hood, every time you run change detection, you create a new virtual DOM, and now you have two versions of DOM, two snapshots, and you do diff. You run. Yeah, you do a diff between these two to figure out what is the difference, and then you create a set of operations that reflect that difference in the real DOM. The problem with this approach is that every time you run change detection, you need to create lots of data structures in memory that you throw away right after the change detection is done. This creates a lot of memory pressure, and especially if you run change detection a lot, and if you have a bigger application, you will see that the garbage collector runs a lot and becomes a major bottleneck in your application. Incremental DOM is using a different approach where you have virtual DOM that is mutable. A virtual DOM is immutable. Incremental DOM is mutable, and as you mutate it, internally these data structures keep track of changes. So every time you change an attribute, we know that this node somewhere here in the tree got mutated, and the attribute was changed from this value to that value. So rather than creating the entire tree every time and doing the diff, you know which nodes have changed, and then you can just go through this tree and reflect the changes in the DOM. This is basically how Ivy works, but without an APIs that we expose to developers. So in theory, it's even more memory efficient. In practice, we don't currently want to introduce more APIs to developers before we get a good handle of all the changes we're doing in Ivy, because Ivy is already a huge change for us. I think that's it in short. Does that answer the question?
We have time for a few more questions. There are a couple of questions about
NGRX should, I don't want to say that things will work without thinking through. I assume that these two applications are using separate change detection cycles, so you probably need to, like part of the integration work will have to be making sure that you trigger the right change detection in the right application, but in theory it should work. We can discuss more offline.
the next question is from the person who doesn't like NGRX. But yeah, so the question is like, you clearly don't want to make it official state management of Angular since you keep it external. What are my alternatives?
Yeah, so it is an intentional decision not to include NGRX as the part of Angular offering. And when we talk about Angular, like we typically mean the framework, CDK and the material components and all of the tools we provide. NGRX is not currently included, even though it's the default option used by applications at Google. So applications that use some kind of Flux system, they use NGRX. The reason for this is that it's a community-grown project and supported by the community. It solves a very difficult problem. I think the APIs could be a little more ergonomic and less verbose, and this is probably the main reason why it's not included under the Angular umbrella, because then we'd be on the hook to support it. We are however, thinking about including state management as part of the problem scope that the framework team is solving. So we don't know exactly what they'll do. There are several options right now: NGRX, SX, and I think there's a third one.
Akita.
Which one?
Akita.
Akita, and also Redux proper works with Angular. So there are several options out there that people use. They all come with pros and cons. So once we are done with Ivy, I think this is one of the projects that we'll take on to see, do we want to take an existing solution and make it the best solution, or do we want to work with these communities and build something slightly different and probably combine the best things of all the stuff that is out there? We don't know yet. So for now, NGRX is probably the closest thing to having Angular supported solution, just because Rob Warmold, who's on the team, is on our team, and it's used at Google. But we do know that it's pretty verbose and could be more ergonomic.
And this is some question about repository management, I guess. Feature requests from library authors tend to be marked unique constraints. Isn't that counterproductive for the community?
Yeah, and if this happened to you, then I'm sorry. We're trying to get better at getting handle on issue tracker. We're still failing, even though we are trying hard. I think it's not right that it was marked as low frequency, because component authors, even though the number of them is very low, they have a big impact. So if the person is in the room, maybe follow up with me in person, because we do care.
Cool. The next one is, what percentage of Google internal apps are written with Angular Dart? Dart?
I actually don't know, but it's how to say it? Angular is much bigger compared to Angular Dart. But I don't have the numbers. I just know that there's a significant orders of magnitude difference.
Okay, we're running out of time. I'll ask a question which, like, hopefully all of you will be able to answer, which is unrelated to Angular. I'll ask you for recommendations. One technical, one not technical. Can be book, article, video, whatever. And I'll give you like a few seconds to think about it. Maybe more than a few seconds. I'll recommend reading Angular in that blog, which seems to be pretty good. And now I just took away one of yours, probably.
So I have a good book that I recommended on Twitter recently. It's called Willpower Instinct. It's written, I forget the name, I'm really bad with names. But the author is a psychologist at Stanford, and the book is about willpower and what are the factors that affect willpower and what makes successful people successful, and people that fail to follow through on whatever it is, whether it's a diet or steering clear from drugs or whatever it is, where you need willpower, what makes them fail. And it's really mind-blowing to like see the research done in this area, and there are ways to measure willpower and there are ways to increase willpower, and it's a really well-written book, fun to read, It talks about meditation and many other things, stress and managing stress. So if that's something you care about, then I recommend Willpower Instinct.
On the airplane, I started reading a book called Willpower Instinct because I saw it recommended on Twitter. I'm still on chapter 1.
Is there a book called Willpower Instinct which you would like to recommend?
It's a really great book called Willpower Instinct.
You're not trying to try.
No, actually, I'll give you one that I read recently. It's a controversial book, but I'm from Canada, so he's a Canadian author. 12 Rules for Life, actually. Really like that one, by Jordan Peterson. Just about taking responsibility, and yeah, I don't know if you read that or not, but it's a good one.
No, I don't know that
Yeah.
one, but it sounds similar to...
Jordan Peterson.
No. Do you know Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck?
Yes, I was thinking that
That's
one
an
too, but
amazing
I
book.
couldn't remember what it's called, but I read that one too, yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
another good
actually
one.
the real name of the book, and
Yeah.
it's an amazing book.
Yeah.
So that's it for today. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for speaking. We can hang out here for like 10-15 minutes, and then we're going to the Tippler bar. So we'll go together in the group.